True success is about embracing innovation while preserving tradition. In the misty hills of Cornwall, a young baker called Oliver was struggling to keep his family's century-old bakery going. The village had become impoverished with the decline of fishing and the disappearance of tourists. Every morning, looking at the empty stalls, he sighed and muttered, "Even Grandma's penny loaf doesn't attract anyone anymore." One November evening, she discovered a dusty trunk in the attic. Inside was her grandmother's handwritten recipe for the lost spice pie. "It only makes the brave rich," the recipe began. Oliver's fingers trembled at the list of exotic ingredients, such as saffron and rare Indian cinnamon. As the clock tower in the village square struck midnight, Oliver looked out the window at the misty harbor. The bakery's debts were mounting. This recipe would either be its last hope or hasten its demise. The next morning, Oliver's first job was to go to Truro market, 50 miles away. Mr. Higgins, the spice merchant, quoted a high price for saffron. "Half your monthly profit, lad. Is it worth the risk?" Oliver squeezed the last of the gold out of his pocket. If he bought these spices, he might not even be able to sell bread to the villagers next week. When he returned to the village, Mrs. Thompson, one of the customers, asked, "Do you have that old sourdough rye again?" When Oliver explained the recipe, the villagers laughed skeptically. "Indian spices in Cornwall? Nobody wants fancy flavors here." That night, sitting on the cold stone floor of the bakery, Oliver thought of his grandmother's words. True courage is taking a step in spite of fear. Either he would create a flavor that would surprise the village, or he would lose everything. The first attempt was a fiasco. The cinnamon was too much, and the dough was raw. Even her cat Whiskers ran away from the smell. On the second attempt, she burnt her hand adjusting the oven temperature. On the third night, in sleeplessness and despair, she asked Mrs. Wilkins, the town's retired chef, for help. "You have to balance the spices," Mrs. Wilkins whispered, "and, most importantly, add love." On the fourth attempt, Oliver lightly roasted the saffron and freshly grated the cinnamon. He used his grandmother's technique of mixing the dough with a brass spoon. On the morning of the village fair, a giant sign hung over Oliver's stall. "Cornwall's golden pie, for the brave only." When the butcher's dog wouldn't even eat the first slice, his heart sank, until a little girl called Lucy shouted, "This is the best thing in the world!" Within an hour, all the pies were sold out. Lucy's mum wrote a review in a gourmet magazine in London. The following week, busloads of tourists filled the village square. Even Mrs. Thompson begged, "Teach me the recipe." 6 months later, Oliver's Bakery was listed in the Michelin Guide as Cornwall's Golden Bakery. He paid off his debts and even bought a new fishing boat for the town. But his most valuable reward was a note in his grandmother's diary. "Risk is the granddaughter of courage.